Alexandria. It is known for playing an enormous role in the building of the United States of America. Known from the schools and the museums, Alexandria has helped shape the U.S.
This historical city that many people call home today was not always a large, prosperous, and diverse place.
Alexandria has been through the toughest of times and through the best of it all.
This is a history of Alexandria, Virginia.
Alexandria was not always the equal, diverse, and populated city it is today. It actually began as a small seaport for the British and the colonies. It eventually became a prosperous and busy colonial port. It was known for the importing of slaves and the exporting of tobacco during the colonial era. During the War of 1812, Alexandria served as a center for British troops. During the Civil War, it was known for the housing and caretaking of Union soldiers. As we go through the many sites still held by Alexandria today, keep in mind the brief history of this beautiful city.
Alexandria participated in the Civil War not only as a place for the housing of Union soldiers, but also as a standpoint between the Confederates and our capital, Washington, D.C. The fort known for this in Alexandria is Fort Ward. Fort Ward began construction in July 1861 due to a loss of Union soldiers in the First Battle of Bull Run. The fort finished construction in September 1861 and was built by contraband volunteers. Fort Ward was constructed with 540 yards of earth-based walls and 24 cannons. Although after the Second Battle of Bull Run, it was expanded to 818 yards of earth-based walls and given an extra 12 cannons. Although Fort Ward never actually saw combat, the fort was well equipped to serve as a part of the defensive line for DC. After the Civil War ended in 1865, the fort was abandoned in December 1865 and the salvageable materials were later sold. After many years of decay, the fort was later rebuilt for historical purposes.
People have been volunteering for events throughout all of history, whether it was shown through war, their community, or just random events. People have always attempted to benefit their community even if it was for little benefit. Alexandria had many participants in war efforts and in their community, an example being the Friendship Firehouse, which was created in 1855. This group of old and new Alexandria volunteered as Alexandria's first group of firefighters. Throughout many years of volunteering by Alexandria citizens, the firehouse advanced through technologies which is shown today in the Museum of the Friendship Firehouse.
Since its construction from 1785 to 1903, the Lee Fendall House served as a home to 37 members of the Lee family. This period of residency was interrupted during the Civil War. In 1863, the Union Army seized the property for use as a hospital for its wounded soldiers. History did not come to a halt upon the departure of the last member of the Lee family in 1903. Robert Downham, a prominent Alexandria haberdasher and liquor purveyor, resided with his family in this house for the next 31 years. Since its construction in 1785, the house has served as home to 37 members of the Lee family, hundreds of convalescing Union soldiers during the Civil War, Alexandria's locally prominent Downham family, and one of our nation's most controversial and significant 20th century labor leaders, John L. Lewis. Philip R. Fendall filled up the half-acre yard with stables, laundries, a rabbit house, a pigeon house, a two-story wooden dwelling, a warehouse, and his office. Although the gardens were charming, it really wasn't as important as the other attractions that showed little importance in the comparison to the actual house. But today, it is a beautiful, award-winning half-acre garden and complements the Lee family.
Old Presbyterian Meeting House founded in the early 18th century. Scottish Presbyterians were among the early European settlers of northern Virginia and were involved in establishing Alexandria as a port in 1749. When George Washington died at Mount Vernon in December 1799, for community memorial services were conducted at the meeting house. In 1809, the Alexandria Presbyterian Cemetery is established. In 1835, lightning strikes rained down on the meeting house in July, which caused a huge fire that destroyed most of it. The rebuilt structure, completed in 1837, utilized a Georgian style, but the roof assumes a straight roof line. When the Commonwealth of Virginia joins the Confederate States of America, Alexandria is immediately occupied by the U.S. Army forces, which occurred during 1861 through 1865.
Mount Vernon, located at 3200 Mount Vernon Highway, is one of the most prominent places, mainly because it was the home of the first president, George Washington, and his family. George Washington wasn't the only person who lived in the house, mainly because it was passed down through generations of Washingtons. Actually, the area's original name was Little Hunting Creek Plantation and changed to Mount Vernon after Lawrence Washington named it in order to show honor for his commanding officer, Admiral Edward Vernon. The home of George Washington isn't your average home because it is 10 times larger than any average home in colonial Virginia. Even though George Washington freed many slaves, which was stated in his will, he was a slaveholder that held over 300 slaves at Mount Vernon. George Washington had a huge garden that provided food for the visitors, while it was redesigned many times. Mount Vernon wasn't only known for housing Washington, but instead for the whiskey it made that later was built into a large distillery because of the profit Washington made with the 300 gallons he sold. Today, 1 million people visit Mount Vernon every year, while George Washington himself had less than 700 guests a year. Ivy Hill is one of Alexandria's largest and most historic cemeteries with a wealth of protected flora and fauna. The Ivy Hill Cemetery dates all the way back to 1811. The burials began at the cemetery in 1811, and it received a charter as a community cemetery in 1856. This historical site has descendants of the Washington family, Thomas Jefferson, Brian Fairfax, 8th Lord Fairfax of Cameron, and Richard Bland Lee are buried at the cemetery, as are railroad magnates Fairfax Harrison and Benjamin Franklin Stringfellow. Other notable graves include those of aeronautical pioneer Werner von Braun, Judge Albert Vickers Bryan, and Congressman John Critcher and Charles Creighton Carlin. Critcher's daughter, the painter Catherine Carter Critcher, is buried here as well, in the family plot. This cemetery is the final resting place for more Confederate than any other Alexandria cemetery.
Gadsby's Tavern is located in 138 North Royal Street of Old Town Alexandria today. The museum consists of 2 buildings, 1, a tavern made in 1785, and 2, a city hotel made in 1792. Many people during this time attended events at this tavern, including George Washington. He enjoyed the hospitality provided by the tavern keepers, and he attended the annual birthnight ball twice, which was held in his honor. Other prominent patrons included John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, and the Marquis de Lafayette. Gadsby's Tavern was the center of Alexandria's hospitality and socializing in the late 18th and early 19th century. By the turn of the 20th century, Gadsby's Tavern, renamed the City Hotel and Tavern, no longer operated as a hotel. John Wise, the owner of the tavern, died in 1815, and with his death, the building went through many different hands, being run as taverns, lawyers' offices, auction houses, and possibly even as a hospital during the American Civil War. The tavern has been held up through history and has served many purposes. A Scottish merchant who became a leading landowner and social and political figure in North Virginia quickly became financially successful. In 1751 to 1753, John Carlisle built his own house, known as the Carlisle House. This house quickly became a center of social and political life and gained a foothold in history when British General Braddock made the house his headquarters in 1775. Braddock used this house to hold a meeting with 5 colonial governors, to plan the early campaigns of the French and Indian War. John Carlisle has owned thousands of acres of land, as well as 3 plantations. Today, this house stands as a major landmark of Alexandria history. From an early seaport to present day, Alexandria has been a prosperous and growing city. It is a wonderful site filled with the history of the good and the bad. Held up against time to serve as a historical landmark, Alexandria has a never-ending contribution to the history of the United States. Every city has its own history. Now find out more about yours. Thanks for watching and have a great day.